Is there such thing as an excessive love for the Jewish people, Avos Yisrael, that's gone completely out of bounds? Can one go too far in excess in trying to justify the actions of Jewish people, to try and show that something that on the face of it is a very terrible deed is something which is not so terrible, even meritorious? We'll have a chance to look at these questions as we look at a very strange story of a fast day, which in commemoration, in memory of the people who slandered the land, the spies, Motziei Dibat Haaretz, people who slandered the land of Israel. And their story is, of course, the theme of this week's Parsha, Parshat Shlach. This very strange story, which begins with the Bahag, the Baal Halachot Gedolot, perhaps the earliest attempt to codify halacha, Jewish law and regulation and custom in all fields. Very controversial, as one can imagine, as to who wrote it when. There were many different versions and so on and so forth, but it's at least 1,000 years old. As I said, it's very likely the first codification of the halacha. And in the section of the Bahag that deals with Tisha B'Av, the fast of the 9th of Av, there is a list of 24 fast days. Fast days which the Bahag says are Torah obligations. Calls it Elu Yamim Shemitanim Behem Min Torah. But there's no source. No one has ever found a source for this. Already the Rishonim, the early medieval halachists, were voiced their surprise. There's absolutely no source, nothing in the Talmud, Tosefta, the earliest rabbinic sources. But it's in the Bahag. Now, the Bahag is not necessarily the most normative, the most compelling book of halacha, and I'm sure there are lots of things that we do that don't conform to what the Bahag says. But this particular ruling of the 24 fast days was included by the Torah, the Rav Yaakov ben Asher in the Arba Turim, which was the forerunner of the Shulchan Aruch, and it was in the Shulchan Aruch as well. Now, among these 24 fast days, there is a fast which is in the Hildesheim edition of the Bahag. It's the 7th of Elul. I think I've seen it elsewhere as the 17th of Elul. That's not that important, because this is a day in which the spies, or as he calls them, Motziei Dibat Haaretz, those who slandered the land of Israel, died in a plague. Why should there be a fast to commemorate their death? The Beis Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Karo, in his Beis Yosef, his commentary on the Torah, says that this is incomprehensible. I mean, it should be a day of celebration. Avod v'sheim rina. We should be thankful and singing in joy that these evil people have died. Instead, we commemorate their passing in a fast day. And in fact, despite this almost sarcastic remark which he makes in the Beit Yosef on the Torah, in his own Shulchan Aruch, the most authoritative codification of Jewish law ever, he also brings down these fast days. Now, excuse me, people, of course, have tried to explain and justify the actions of the spies in a number of ways, and not always in a necessary connection with this fast day. Some have felt that they deliberately wanted to delay the entry to Eretz Yisrael because they knew that in Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel, we would have to work for a living. We would be farmers. We would be raising crops and sweating out on the fields and getting nervous if it didn't rain, and so on and so forth. Whereas in the desert, we had manna from heaven. God took care of everything immediately. So why should we want to give that up? Perhaps the most interesting justification I heard for the spies is this. In last week's Parsha, at the end of last week's Parsha, if you recall, Moshe emanated, gave off some of his prophetic spirit, let us say, to the 70 elders. And as part of the parsha, we have these two people, Eldad and Medad, who are running around the camp shouting out prophecies. Eldad, Umedad, Nabim b'machaneh, and Yeshua tells Moshe, lock him up. Adoni Moshe Klaim. And Moshe says, Adarabah, quite the contrary. Wouldn't it be wonderful if everyone could prophesy? Well, what prophecy were they shouting out? According to this, or according to the Midrash, they were saying that Moshe will die and Yeshua will take us into the land of Israel. Now, according to the explanation I've heard, these spies said, wait a minute, we have to do something. We don't want Moshe to go away so soon. And so let's have Moshe live a longer life. We can learn more Torah from him, and he will have a longer life. So they deliberately incited the people to refuse to enter Eretz Yisrael, and thus leading to the punishment of having nearly 40 more years of wandering in the desert, in order to give Moshe Rabbeinu another almost 40 years of life. Very odd story. Well, although no one I know, including myself, has ever fasted on this day, and I don't think that most people, you or I, will meet, have ever heard of it. It's on the books, as we say. And the way Jewish law works, where authorities can do not openly disagree with the people who were the earlier authorities, it's hard to do something. Even Moshe Feinstein, Zecher Tzadik Levracha, didn't like this idea of fasting for the spies, but the most he could say was Dvarim Bulti Muvanim, incomprehensible why we should fast. But he couldn't say, strike it from the books. So we have this, at least formally speaking, this fast, and now there are people who are trying to say, well, why should we have a fast? Setting aside this, that they know that these stories, like I said, that they had some good intentions in slandering, assuming that they were as evil and as wicked as the Torah portrays them in the Parsha, is there any reason to fast on the day they're passing? And people have proposed some explanations, and I'm going to propose one which is sort of in line with things I've heard, a little bit different. The spies were the leaders of the Jewish people, Roshei B'nai Yisrael Hema. They weren't ordinary people. Matter of fact, what Moshe really sent was a delegation of the leaders of the people, not a reconnaissance mission of, trained spies and field foot soldiers, but a delegation of the leaders of the Jewish people. And yet they, for whatever reason, for whatever motivation, for whatever happened, misled the Jewish people, led to this great sin. And so we should have a separate fast about this. That is to say, with the fast of the fact that we cried by Yevkuba Lalazet, that we cried about when we heard the reports of these spies on Tisha B'Av. Well, okay, that Tisha B'Av, as we know, we fast about a number of things, including the story of the spies. That's for the fact that there was this incident in which the Jews cried about being asked to enter a land that was so inhospitable. But we should have a separate fast for the fact that the leaders of the Jewish people, these 10 out of the 12 Roshei B'nai Israel, misled the people. That's a separate issue to be concerned about and to mourn over. And we've seen through the generations, for motivations that we may know, we may not know, may be good, may be not so good, leaders of the Jewish people have misled us and caused a great harm. And so we should at least take this in mind, and as I said, have it as a separate issue to contemplate, even if we don't fast, to think about and to see what we can do, at the very least to pray that our leaders be given guidance we have a Gula Shlema Erev Yameinu. Amen.